Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about the latest ongoings of the international economy, various aspects of the American market, and what's just been going on overall with America and the decline of America. And so here we see that in Market Watch, the title is "This Hadn't Happened on the U.S. Treasury Market in 250 Years, Now It's About to." And so we see here that the 10-year Treasury bond is on track for a third year of losses in 2023, something that hasn't happened in 250 years of U.S. history. In short, it has never happened, says strategists at Bank of America. And we can see here this graph showing that this is historical, what is happening. There's a staggering 40% jump in U.S. nominal GDP growth, factoring in growth in inflation since the COVID lows of 2020. The chart shows bond returns have suffered this year. The stock market is suffering this year. Inflation is really out of control. And so there's things happening in the American economy that just should be shocking to people. And so this article ends with the yield on the 10-year Treasury was holding steady on Friday at 4.102% after data showed the U.S. economy generated 187,000 jobs in August, but the unemployment rate rose to 3.8 from 3.5%. The job gains were revised lower for July and June. So what we're seeing is they come out with numbers that are really high initially for the jobs report, and then we end up finding out those numbers are all lies and they're always higher than is actually true. And so we know this isn't random because it's always trending in the same direction where the initial number jobs report is higher than it actually is in reality. And so fake numbers, completely fake numbers. We see some other things though happening, which is the de-dollarization that is going on throughout the entire world. So there are three reasons why nations want to break up with the United States dollar. The US dollar has been the dominant world reserve currency for decades, but its dominance is fading. Sanctions against Russia have spurred other countries into considering backup currencies for trade. US monetary policies, the strong USD, and the structural shift in the global oil trade also contribute. So we see here, let's see what this article has to say. So dollar has been the reserve currency since World War II. Essentially, the entire old world was on fire due to World War II. The UK couldn't be the global superpower anymore, and so the United States took up that mantle. Nearly 60% of international reserves are held in dollar-denominated assets, according to the IMF. And the dollar is the most widely used currency for trade. And this went up after the collapse of the Soviet Union because the United States was supposedly at the end of history, the sole superpower of the world. We're realizing that's not the case, and the United States dollar isn't particularly valuable. And because of the erratic actions of the United States, there's really no reason to hold on to the United States dollar. I certainly don't hold on to United States dollars unless I absolutely have to. Okay, so now we see Western-led sanctions against Russia related to its invasion of Ukraine are making other countries wary of potential consequences of crushing Washington. Some, such as Brazil, Argentina, Bangladesh, and India, are lining up backup currencies and assets such as the Chinese yuan and Bitcoin for trade and payments. I've been back and forth on Bitcoin. I'll talk about it more in another video. I think it's beneficial unless there's a complete collapse of the system or unless countries outright ban it, such as China is trying to. I don't know if they ever did outright ban it, but I know they certainly had wanted to. But for right now, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general seem to be a good bet compared to a lot of fiat currencies of the world. Okay, so here are the three reasons countries around the world are attempting to line up plans to possibly move away from the dollar-denominated world. U.S. monetary policy holds too much sway over the rest of the world. The U.S. is the issuer of the world's reserve currency, which is also the dominant currency in the international trade and payment system. Consequently, it has an outsized hold on the world economy and is often overvalued. So the United States can use its monetary policy to attack other countries. It can push the mistakes it makes onto other countries that are downstream because of their holding of the US dollar. It has a lot of different mechanisms just because the world uses the United States dollar so much. And other countries are recognizing that that's not a good thing for their own countries to allow the United States to do this. Okay, so people have called this control of the United States dollar an exorbitant privilege. One facet of this privilege is that the U.S. might not run into a crisis if it is unable to pay its debts when the value of the dollar falls sharply, because Washington could simply issue more money. And what ends up happening is, because other countries are holding on to U.S. dollars, if inflation happens, other countries and their reserves suffer as well, because they're holding on to a currency that's just been devalued because the United States pays off its debts by just printing more money. They don't have to actually create more value to go along with that more money, like other countries do have to create more value in order to print more money. It also means that countries around the world have to tailor U.S. economic and monetary policies closely to avoid a spillover impact on their economies. We saw with the 2007-2008 crisis that there was a lot of spillover effect, and it was intentional to a large extent, which was that the United States made mistakes and they pushed the consequences of those mistakes onto other countries. Okay, so the second thing is a strong US dollar is getting too expensive for emerging nations. The greenback gaining strength against most currencies around the world is making imports far more expensive for emerging nations. In Argentina, political pressure and a decline in exports contributed to a fall in US dollar reserves and pressured the Argentinian peso, which in turn fueled inflation. I heard, and who knows when the time of this video going out, I heard the new leader of Argentina might actually be transitioning their economy over to be entirely the United States dollar because their own currency is doing so poorly in comparison to the United States dollar. I think in the short to medium term, that might actually be helpful for the Argentinian economy, but it's not really going to be a good thing in the long term to give up your entire monetary policy like that to the United States. Okay, so this has spurred Argentina to start paying for Chinese imports using yuan instead of US dollars. That might change because the new leader is so hostile towards China. Stronger USD will weaken its role as a reserve currency. If access to USD becomes more expensive, borrowers will search for alternatives. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has been one of the most vocal proponents of setting up alternative trade settlement currencies, going as far as to egg Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa to move away from the US dollar. Okay, so third, global trade and oil demand is diversifying, putting the petrodollar at risk. So MBS, the leader of Saudi Arabia, has already showed a willingness to pivot away from the United States by allowing trade of oil in other currencies aside from the US dollar. And this is really the end of the petrodollar and really end of one of the two things that I think are still backing the United States dollar. The United States dollar is not backed by tangible values. The United States dollar is backed by energy, such as the petrodollar, so the trade of oil. And it's always been essentially required to trade oil in the United States dollar. And so that's one of its forces back in the United States dollar and giving it some degree of value, because all countries need oil and they need energy in general for their economies to run. But the other thing was military force. And the United States military is extremely incompetent. No one wants to join it. Its equipment is extremely defective. We're seeing in multiple battlefields across the entire world that the United States is losing. Its proxies are losing. It's not a good backing for the US dollar. And then now we're seeing that the petrodollar, using the United States dollar for trade of energy, is not happening as frequently as it used to. And MBS, I think, was very smart here because he's recognizing he has to hedge his bets for the future of his country and for his reputation in the long term as a leader, because if not, they could be completely beholden to the United States while the United States is very clearly on the decline. Okay, so this petrodollar was formalized in 1945 when Saudi Arabia and the U.S. reached a historic deal. U.S. became energy independent and a net oil exporter with the rise of the shale oil industry, blah, blah, blah. The relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia, which has been described as similar to frenemies, has also been tested over several issues in recent years, such as when then-President Donald Trump complained that Saudi Arabia wasn't paying the U.S. a fair price for its defenses, and when President Joe Biden snubbed MBS over the murder of the Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Such tensions against the backdrop of the shale energy revolution raised the possibility that Saudi Arabia could abandon its U.S.-denominated oil pricing one day. Sarah Miller, an editor at Energy Independence, an energy information firm, wrote in November last year. And yeah, we're seeing they've already essentially abandoned the United States denominated oil pricing. To a certain extent, they're willing to trade the currency in other denominations. And so, yeah, that's the current situation in terms of the United States. It's not doing very well economically, fiscally, monetarily. It's just, it's losing across the board. We've already talked about how it's losing militarily. We've talked about how it's losing politically. The United States is just constantly on the back foot. It's not doing a good job. And people are really starting to wake up to this across America, that the United States just doesn't have what it takes to be a competent member of modern society, a great power in modern society. It's losing to Russia, which I like to say is held together by Vladimir Putin's willpower and duct tape. And so imagine losing to Russia when you want to also compete and pick a fight with China. United States just can't do it. It really cannot do it at this point. It's just losing across the board, constantly in full retreat. So that's our video today, getting into some of the nitty gritty of what's going on in the world and some of the declines of the United States economically, fiscally, monetarily. So if you found this video to be helpful, please give us a thumbs up. It does help us in the algorithm. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble for more content. Share our channel with others. We are trying to grow and expand. We are being suppressed in the algorithm. And we have a few things we're going to do in a few months probably that will help us to get more engagement on YouTube and Rumble. But if you can help us as well by sharing the channel, we would definitely appreciate it if you found this to be valuable. Also, please leave us a comment. Questions, concerns, critiques you might have. I do read all of them, and I do try to respond when necessary. So thank you for watching. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.